months now. See what everybody else thinks about that. It's an interesting concept. We'll see what everyone else thinks.
And then there'll be, I assume there'll be some shuffling.
Yeah, well, it's so hard to get people to be on board.
Yeah.
Well, they said recently that they've had a lot of applicants.
This last round, we had a pretty
Yeah.
good number of applicants, actually.
So I guess it may be changing.
But there was a discussion of basically, like the planning commissioners sort of asking whether they feel it's more appropriate to move on the DRB or the planning commission.
Yeah, I did get a
Yeah,
right of
yeah.
first refusal for the
When we built
position.
our house, actually, there was an architectural review.
Design review board.
Yeah, right, right.
Mhm. And were they?
Design review commission, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
It was board, I think, yeah.
And did they make the decisions as to, like, they were decision-making
They were,
body, or did they
so.
Yeah.
recommend?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think you're
Okay.
ready when you'd like.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Board Member Dyer?
Here.
Board Member Goodhue?
Here.
Board Member Hall?
Here.
Board Member Pomeroy is absent, and Chair Board Member Croman.
Here.
All right,
If
you have a quorum, sir.
Perfect. If you'll rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we're just getting started. Do we have any public appearances? Hearing no notification of public appearances, do we have any announcements? No announcements, so we'll move on with orders of business. The first order of business we have is a revised proposal for the HRB Board Member Carol Hall's plan for an additional historic designation. So can we hear is there any staff report on that?
No, sir.
Okay, so we just have from our last meeting, we had asked for some additional updates based on board members' comments, and then we were going to gauge if we felt that document was ready to go as a proposal document, not a final document, but a proposal document before the city council. Right, so anybody?
So just to update, since Marnie isn't here, I looked back on your notes, Jordan, and on Eric Dyer's notes, well, the notes I took from Eric Dyer, and did as much as I could, but I didn't know if Eric had anything further. I'm sure he does, but with the thought, so in red, I showed the omissions and the additions based on what had been said and so forth that you all have read, I'm sure. And with the thought that this is not a final document, this is something, really an idea to be put before the council, a concept to be put before the council. And so even if it's not quite the way we want it to be yet, I think I would hope that we could send it on to the council with the look at possible incentives and so forth for them to look at that, also in relation to how much it would cost the city personnel-wise and any other way. I know Brandon has probably a good grasp on that, what it might require. And so that's pretty much it.
Right, so I think at this point, we decide if we think conceptually it's ready to go before the city council. At that point, based on what Marnie has told us, they'll decide if it's something they want to pursue, and then it'll be a then the staff will dig into things like costs and, kind of cleaning things up and things like that. So can we have some discussion on whether we think it's ready conceptually to go forward, or if we want to do that or not? I think Carol, we know where Carol stands.
I guess, I think I mentioned this, and I apologize, the bandwidth is up here. I haven't been able to get my notes out, but hopefully you get a chance to review the video and things. I think whatever I said at the meeting was basically what I would have put in the notes. But one of the things I think I mentioned in the meeting that I think would be a good idea, especially if you were to bring it to council, would be some examples of what you're talking about. I know we kind of have this abstract idea of what type of home this would be, and I know Carol mentioned she has 3 on her block or what that you have in mind.
Thank you.
But maybe that's something, photographs of the type of homes you would kind of consider for that. And I don't know if there's any case studies of how that would be handled. That's something I had mentioned I had at least a couple projects I can think of that would be maybe something to look at. And I'll review that. I mean, in other words, the question to the designer would be, if this incentives were in place, how would I utilize them? And would that be enough to incentivize the owner to keep the home?
I think Ian Martin is in the process of photographing a lot of houses in Carmel at this point.
Well, I think Carol would be the one. I mean, this is your proposal, so I'm just thinking.
But I'm just saying he probably would share his photographs. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure.
Yes.
If you need better photographs or something, but I was just thinking of who would be taking advantage of how many houses? I mean, this would be a question I think I
shouldn't speak for him, so I can't say his photographs.
How many houses are we talking about? Would this be really something that could be successfully utilized for the stated goal? I mean, some sort of analysis about that I think would be helpful at the council level. There's a few things I think I mentioned in the last meeting as well, is this trying to do some sort of separation between historic preservation law that we use to establish eligibility for the inventory and such, and what we're talking about here. So I'm thinking, even the discussion of the comparison between what is allowed under the inventory and what would be allowed on a level 2, maybe even the name level 2 is question mark, because I think what you're doing is not part of necessarily historic preservation rules that we use, like the second interior standards, right? So this is so just thinking about a title for what we're talking about, which is basically, trying to preserve old housing stock in Carmel. That cumulative, I mentioned this before, that cumulatively adds to the character of the town. I did get a chance to look at the email that was sent today, and that you said it was from David Girolamo. Yes, I know David. Okay, so he does bring up, I thought, a few important points, and one of which I talked about too. There's a level of detail that I think probably needs to be pinned down, like the discussion of integrity and what level of integrity are we talking about. It's not as much as something to be considered on the inventory, but what does that mean? I mean, does that mean like you have a house, you do have an age date, for example, that's 70 years, years or older. Mm-hmm. And does that mean that a 70-year-old house that has an addition built in 2005 is still eligible? I mean, that's the sort of questions I would.
Yeah, and the checklist, hopefully.
There's a time limit on it, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You do have a time limit on it. They have to be 40, 50 years old.
Yeah, 70 years old.
70 years old. But but I'm saying,
okay.
But integrity is kind of, what happens during that period of time.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Well, something even, okay.
What was the other? I think David brings up another important point, which was you don't want this to be counter to these established guidelines of being subordinate to the forest and the character of the town. And so the incentives to add larger floor area, I think, has to be qualified a little bit. I mean, I mentioned some things like, you know, being able to have an expanded basement, since basements are now counted as floor area. Obviously, those don't add to the mass or the site of the building from the street. So that, but I can see you would not want to allow one of these residences to go above the floor area limits.
Right, and I think that's said, actually.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, because I do recall that. And his point about the trees, we don't want to take down the trees, well, of course, that would have to be a decision we aren't going to allow a healthy, big, beautiful tree to be taken down regardless, if you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if they wanted to add on right where the tree is or
Yeah.
whatever. So it depends on which incentives that we would approve versus not approve.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of hoping, I guess the concept was, from my perspective, to try it out and see how it rides, how many houses would actually qualify, and what kinds of incentives mean something to people versus don't mean something to people. As kind of a sampling, I guess, of how this would proceed on a slow basis. Like, I don't know how many permits you look at each month on average, and how many of those might qualify under the checklist for looking at as a level 2 or whatever we call it. Do you have any feel for that, Brandon?
Well, certainly not we process all applications, meaning like, you know, new construction, additions to newer homes, things like that. So I'd have to do a little bit of work to see applications for, you know, XYZ. I think in order to be able to give you a real number on that, we probably would have to flesh out the criteria a little better of what qualifies as a level 2, because I think that seems like something you all are still working on a little bit. It's like what.
Yeah,
what
the
qualifies.
checklist would probably really define that for the planning department. And there may be something missing from the checklist, or,
Yeah.
you know, or more specificity needed in the checklist. But that would be something we'd work with the planning department
Yeah.
on.
Well, I mean, maybe a good just guesstimate would be how many, like I'm gonna look to my staff right now, how many would you say we process in a month for historic evaluations? Like, those are ones that at least need an HE on them. If we had to guess.
Probably at least 6 a month.
Okay.
I'm averaging 2 assigned at each.
Yeah, that's kind of, I was thinking 6 to 10, 5
Yeah.
to 10. So 10, like, let's say 10 a month maybe. Yeah. But, you know, don't hold us to that, because certainly
Right.
without the criteria of what qualifies, but it's not 100 and it's not 1. It's, you know, 10-ish.
I was a little confused by where these proposals, these applications would be presented. And the planning commission was mentioned, but by the time you go to the planning commission, don't you have a set of plans for something that you're proposing to build? I mean, coming to the HRB would be more workable to my mind, saying you want this designation. Because if I had hired a designer to design my house, and then found out that, you know, there's this deal out there that you can get, am I going to start all over again? I don't know. And I
That's a
do.
good point.
Excuse
Yeah.
me? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do also think that it has to be within the existing guidelines. Otherwise, I don't think it will succeed.
Which existing
With the
guidelines?
Secretary of Interior standards and.
For
you know,
historic, you mean?
Yes.
Well, the whole point of it is that it wouldn't qualify as
It
historic.
wouldn't be historic, but
Yeah.
you can't be selective of what kind of building you're going to be looking at. It has to be the same sort of styles that are recognized in the city, I think.
Which I think you mentioned in the.
Yeah, I mean, she took out the list of types, which broadens the aperture a little bit, although it's, still some of the other criteria, like the 70-year-old criteria and stuff still remains. So it's gonna, by that definition, it's gonna probably rule out some of the ones that we talked about last time.
I also added the general plan statement, which, we have to stay within the general plan.
I mean, the checklist does say is representative of at least one traditional historic theme. You needn't be exact representation.
Just like
So-
the house we just looked at is craftsman, but yeah.
Craftsmanish. This one, Esther.
Can I ask Carol, on the second page, you list, I was just trying to find that in the general plan. You list a couple of quotes
Okay.
from the general plan. Do you know the sections those come from?
I can find them.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Okay.
I'll have to go back
Oh, I
and dig
didn't see
for them.
this, huh?
I think too, we've made sausage a bunch of times with this, and certainly there's a lot more to go. But the guidance we got from staff last time and the guidance that we agreed to is this something that we think is viable enough to go to the city council with the proviso that, it's not a finished product, and to kind of to gauge their feeling on, is it even something that we want to keep playing around with? So, I mean, I think maybe if we kind of give it a thumbs up or thumbs down to go to the city council, and then we kind of determine how do we want to present that. I mean, obviously, we've got a starting point that Carol's put a lot of work into. Do we put a slideshow together with a couple slides, like Eric suggested, of houses that are would fit into this category, or, how do we want to do that? Or do we just do a one-page kind of executive summary that says, this is the intent? So maybe we could get a feel for the first part of, do we think it's ready to go forward? And then if it is, then how do we think it should go forward? Is that reasonable?
Yes, and I'm happy to go through another iteration if we feel more comfortable with that, or just as a concept, as you say, just send them a page describing generally what we're talking about and seeing whether, it's something that they would entertain. Either one of those.
And I guess, the only other thing I would mention is, that we talked about taking out the listings of all the styles, but I'd be happy with a reference to the traditions of Carmel that's illustrated in the context statement as a way to define it. Or I think there probably does need to be a little more work on what would be allowed, what is considered that would be eligible for this. I don't feel like it's quite defined enough. But that being said, I kind of see where Jordan's going with this in a way. It's like, maybe it's worth, instead of us every meeting going over and over and over this, let the council see it, and if they're interested in us, they think it's a worthy goal or something that's possible or feasible, they can let us know. So I'm not happy saying, I'm voting to support this necessarily right now, but I'm happy to say, let's let the council take a look at it and let us know.
And Brandon, I know you can't pull this answer out of thin air, but if we said, let's put it before the council, how many iterations would it take to get it on the schedule?
Like, when would it go on the city council agenda? We're intentionally keeping it light, and that's basically full. So I think we could get it on for August. Yeah, and I think, if I might, Mr. Chair, just some food for thought for you all, because we, in the planning department, we do this type of thing, getting policy direction on ordinances we're working on. I think you all are on the right track with, at this point, maybe sending it up to council so that you all don't spend more time. If from a policy perspective, if the council says this isn't something we're interested in at all, then you all don't have to spend more time. On the flip side, there's always the risk if you don't have it fleshed out enough for them to understand your concept, then that may be a reason. But it would not be unusual for them to see some sort of ordinance or policy that isn't fully baked, that there's still things to do, like how are we going to, certain criteria we don't know yet. They would be used to that sort of decision, for what it's worth. So just that's for your all deliberation.
So if we were decided to send it to the city council for the August agenda, should I write up a description of the proposal rather than us sending them the whole proposal, just a description of what it entails and whether they like the concept or not?
Well, I think if I might, I think that's a question for your counterparts here on the Historic Resources Board, because if they want to sort of, send you as the representative, then you all should agree on what it is you're going to be taking and what you're going to be saying to them.
And actually, we could review that before August, because it's
You
only
could.
June.
You certainly
Yeah.
could. Mhm.
Yeah.
So that might be some good direction to try to get tonight. Is if I guess the first question is, do you want to go forward for the policy decision? And two, who do you want to be your representative, and what do you think that package should look like? So that if I could make a suggestion, those might be the two things you want to focus on this evening.
Great. Okay. So discussion on moving forward or voting on moving forward?
Well, I kind of gave my input,
Yeah.
so I guess and I think Carol's certainly the one to bring that proposal forward. So I guess I would leave it to Carol, if she wants to bring what she has here forward, or whether you want to do one more iteration based on what we've discussed, possibly having some
I think
case studies or examples.
we've discussed it a lot.
Yeah.
And we've given Carol our written input. So, yeah, the concept, but I'm not sure about, the exclusivity of some of it. That bothers me.
So if we did agree to send it forward, we would still have another month that we could, I think, maybe outside of the meeting, fine tune whatever slides or executive summary or whatever it is that we're gonna send forward. We'd have another month to do that before it got to the council, had to get put into their binders. So, I mean, I think even if we decided, let's send it forward, we would still have another month or so to fine tune it, tweak it, whatever, include the things that you feel passionate about, Esther, and also that Eric's brought up. So, you wanna make a motion on it, or how you feeling?
What would the motion look like?
I think let's
I think
first
it's
just,
continuance probably until,
go ahead.
just see, I guess we'd see whatever is presented at the next month, whether you have maybe that would include some sort of PowerPoint you were gonna give or something.
Okay, so,
Is that how you would prefer to do it, Brendan?
It's up to you all. An example of a motion could be to bring this forward to the council for a policy decision in August, to return next month with a draft version of that presentation package for the entire board to consider, and for Board Member Hall to be the representative for the Historic Resources Board on this matter. That would be, I think, that motion, if someone made that motion, would encapsulate kind of what I've just heard from all of you.
okay, I'll make a motion. Am I the best person to make the motion?
I think it's your baby.
Okay, I move that I put together a PowerPoint presentation that would be brought to the City Council at the August agenda meeting, or August council meeting, to show to you, along with a letter describing the concept of the level 2 housing. And I will also work on the details I've heard today to try and move along the proposal, possibly with allowing them to see the full proposal at that point, if they realize that it's still a work in progress, if they want more information to be included with their materials.
So you're proposing that we bring it to the city council for the August agenda, and that at our next meeting, we're gonna have some draft version of what you would like to present.
So it'll just be the general concept and not the specifics?
Well, the PowerPoint presentation might have some specifics in it, but the letter would be general, I think.
Yeah, I think if we did the PowerPoint, we structured it, this is kind of what we're trying to do, and then I think Eric's point of, this is a house that might be a good example for this, just so they can visualize that. And we can play around with that collectively. We can provide Carol with some recommendations and things like that, and then look at it at the next meeting. I mean, that would be good. And then they'll have I think, again, that one or whatever 2-page executive summary that they can read, and then whether we decide to enclose the full thing in that, along with that or not, I think we could probably decide next next meeting, depending on how fleshed out it was.
So we'd have another go at it,
Yes,
is
ma'am.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Although
Unfortunately.
but
I think the idea is to
I think
get something ready and we could just say,
Yeah.
okay, go for it.
Yeah, and then I also think though that as we're building up to this, I think we owe Carol ideas and, you know, specifics, so that it can help her shape this thing.
That would be very helpful.
Okay, so we got a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, can we have a vote, please?
Board Member Dyer,
Yes.
Board Member Hall,
Yes.
Board Member Goodhue,
Yes?
Board Member Pomeroy is absent, and Chair Board Member Croman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. So just to close that out, so then Carol, you need to, let's provide Carol with some guidance that we have, but then also, if you've got drafts that you want to send out before the next meeting or something, so that we're not, you know, again, we're not making sausage in the meeting, we can do some of that in the margins, so that by the time we see it next time, we can have a better, you know, we can maybe have more of our ideas, contained in that document. That would be awesome.
And it would be helpful to get information from you early on,
Roger.
so that I have time to integrate it.
Roger.
Thank you.
Okay.
But if I could, just for
Yes,
what
sir.
it's worth, you guys cannot be emailing each other back and forth about this.
Right.
So,
We can email through,
yeah, you can
Through
email
Marnie.
through Marnie. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure you guys are a Brown Act
Yeah.
committee, so there shouldn't be working back and forth on this. But if Board Member Hall comes up with a draft, we can disperse it out to everyone, and you can have your notes ready for the meeting.
Roger.
Got it.
Okay, and then we'll move forward into the public hearings, starting with DR 23-058, consideration of a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for an after-the-fact addition of Mediterranean tiling below two bay windows on the historic building, part of the A-Court commercial block located at Lincoln and 3rd Southwest Ocean Avenue.
All right, thank you, Chair. All right, so the subject property is located at Lincoln, 3 southwest of Ocean. It's also located in the Downtown Conservation District. Site is located on the Carmel inventory following a intensive survey. It is significant under criteria 3 architecture. It consists of 4 buildings. All buildings are recognized as significant for their architectural style as well as the architect. Building 1 was constructed in 1937 by Melton Latham. Buildings 2 and 3 in 1938 by John Conishofer, and Building 4 in 1973 by James Pruitt. However, Building number 4 is not one of the significant buildings. It has significantly lost its integrity. So only Buildings 1, 2, and 3, which are the street-facing buildings, are listed on the inventory. So the applicant is requesting a after-the-fact approval of tile being added below the bay window of Building 1. The applicant was initially approved for in-kind repainting of the building. However, it was brought to staff's attention that they had exceeded the scope of work and directed to apply for a design review application. While relatively minor scope of work, this is considered a major alteration and as such requires a Phase 2 evaluation and review by the Historic Resources Board for an adoption of determination of consistency. And then also because the project is located in the Downtown Conservation District, additional findings are required to be made. So because this was an after-the-fact approval, the intensive survey for the property also functioned as the Phase 2 evaluation. And it was determined that the after-the-fact work was consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. The evaluation stated that the Mediterranean-style tiles were recently installed under the bay windows of Building 1. Since the tiles were a cosmetic addition, they do not affect the fundamental integrity of Building 1. If the tiles are removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic structure and its environment will not be impaired, which is consistent with Secretary Standard number 10. And then standards number 1 through 9 were not applicable to the scope of work. Municipal Code Section 17.20.280 establishes the review procedure for demolitions, rebuilds, exterior alterations, and additions to building sites located in the Downtown Conservation District. So over to the right, this is the boundary of the Downtown Conservation District. All of the buildings with the hash marks are the existing historic buildings, and then anything without a hash mark is a non-historic property. But again, anything within this bounding box is within the boundary, and then here's our subject property. So just as a refresher, for non-historic properties, the review shall be limited by the HRB to advising the decision-making body on 1, the project's consistency with the established design context of Ocean Avenue and the surrounding commercial area, and 2, identifying any potential impacts on nearby historic resources. So that would be for if a project was affecting a non-historic property. However, this property is historic, so we use this review criteria and the following findings. The board shall apply the Secretary of Interior standards and shall adopt the following findings, which are listed here. I won't read each of the 4. However, based on the conclusions of the intensive survey, the project does meet the 4 findings listed above because the tile addition is cosmetic only and does not affect the fundamental integrity of the building. The tile addition does not alter the distinctive materials, features, spaces, or spatial relationships that characterize the property, and the integrity of the building is not impaired or altered. The tile addition is compatible with the historic materials. Massing or proportions are not a concern, as this is a cosmetic alteration and the massing of the structure is not altered. And lastly, the tile addition is consistent with the design context of the Conservation District. Decorative tile is used throughout the Conservation District, and the inclusion of the tiles on the subject property is not detrimental to adjacent or nearby historic properties. And with that, staff recommends the Historic Resources Board issue a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. So should we open it to public comment, if anyone has a public comment on this issue? Hearing none, we'll close it and bring it back to the board. Any board members have comments on this issue?
I don't really see any problem with it. It is truly cosmetic. And
Okay, so do we have a motion to maybe approve per the staff's recommendation?
I'll go ahead and move then for that the application is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Can we have a vote, please?
Board Member Dyer,
Yes.
Board Member Goodhue,
Yes?
Board Member Hall,
Aye.
Chair Board Member Croman.
Yes?
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then we'll go to DS 22396 Ramos, the consideration of a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for design study application DS 22396 for site additions, alterations, and site modifications for the property located at the corner of 12th and San Antonio.
And Mr. Chair, I worked on the property, or I'm working on the property directly behind this one, so I'll be recusing myself.
Thank you. Okay, staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. You can get the cursor to go. Thanks. Thanks, sir. Thank you, Chair. So this is the determination of consistency for the Ramos project. And it's located on northeast corner of 12th and San Antonio. And it is a Murphy House, built in 1923, and it is significant under Criterion 3 because it exemplifies the craftsman style design, the early 20th century Carmel, and it was added to the historic inventory of June of 2022. It's not 2023, sorry. And some of the character defining features of this is a U-shaped plan, and it has wood shingles and ship slab sliding, masonry chimney. It's a hip roof system, and it also has a Dutch door. And 1, 2, 5, 6, and 10 are consistent with the secretary standards, and 3, 4, 7, and 8 are not applicable. And it will be consistent with 9 if recommended changes are adhered to. And standard 9 talks about any new work should be differentiated from old and should be compatible with the historical material, features, size, and scale, proportion, and the massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. The background on the project description, the modifications addition, there are 3 primary ones. The first one is that they are proposing a new front entryway on the south side, and they're also expanding to create a primary bedroom. It is what is now the kitchen on the north as well as the west elevation, and proposing a new detached garage at the front elevation. So at the front, they are proposing to remove 2 small windows at the lower level and add 2 larger windows. But however, it'll be in a window well and it won't be seen from the street level. And they're also proposing to change the garage door with a French door. And again, because of the new detached garage, it won't be seen. It would be behind it, so it wouldn't be seen. And on the south side, that's where they're proposing the new entrance. And in order to do that, they will be removing an original square bay window, and also a candid bay window will be replaced with a relocated window that's on the further east side. However, the removal will not affect the integrity as a whole, according to our qualified professional. And the entrance will be differentiated. They will have different columns, as well as the sidings, as well as the roof shingles will be slightly different from the original. And on the east and north elevation, which will be on the rear and the rear side, they're proposing to remove 4 non-original windows, 1 original Dutch door, which was moved to the back during the 1950 remodel from the front. And Dutch door is considered a character-defining feature of the house, and according to our qualified professional, it should be preserved. And the applicant is proposing to move it to the lower level front, and the new sidings, the roof, are proposed to be different in style and pattern. And the proposed garage, it's going to have a Carmel stone facade and a flat green roof, and the stone arrangement will be different from the existing chimney stone arrangement. And the project is consistent with Standard 9. And staff recommends the adoption of the resolution issuing the determination of consistency. And this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions? So I just have one question. So when we looked at the property, it looked like the main entrance was from that, as it's oriented here, that southeastern corner, but now they have, is that an existing, what looks to be the main entrance now on the central southern border there, is that an existing entrance now, or is that a new entrance? Leading to the front door?
On the west elevation?
Yeah, well, like if you're looking at your schematic that you have now, it's the bottom center, which I guess would in real life be
the south elevation.
South
yes.
elevation, yeah.
Yeah, that is that they're proposing that to be the front entrance.
But does that entrance already exist?
No, it doesn't exist.
Okay.
There is a window.
I'm sorry, window. The entrance from the street.
The one to the
gate.
On the north side.
Yeah, the gate.
The gate they're proposing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
The gate what?
It's a
They're proposing
proposal.
to
A
a gate over there,
proposed
yeah.
gate, yeah. So what happens to the other gates? There are 2 other gates that are in existence now. Are they remaining or
According to the plans, they're proposing to remove them.
remove them?
The architect's here, he might be able to answer some of those questions.
So what is the distance between the garage, south side of the garage, and the stone wall that is in existence right now?
The stone wall on the south side?
South side.
I don't have the measurements.
I'll ask the
Right,
architect,
yeah,
I
I'm
guess.
a little
Yeah.
puzzled by that, because this, in my reading of this shows a wider walkway there than the poles that were put up for the garage indicated.
That's my
on
impression,
site.
too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can we open it up to the public now so we can ask the architect for some specific information?
Good evening, members of the commission, or the members of the board. My name is Craig Holdren with Holdren Liskey Architecture. I'm representing Tim and Catherine Ramos, who are with us tonight. Thank you for the presentation, sir. Should I go with my spiel, or do you want me to sort of just launch into your specific questions that you've already?
I mean, I think maybe if you have something that you're prepared, maybe it'll help answer
Yeah,
some
I mean,
questions that we have, so.
This is much wider a walkway than was indicated by the site poles.
Yeah, the story poles represent the garage, not
Yes,
that
but the
wall.
garage-
That wall is that wall there was to be rebuilt, that low wall.
So are you going to replace that wall?
Yes, with a stone wall.
Okay, that explains it.
Okay.
You're going to replace it in
That
kind?
low stone
or-
wall south of the garage would be replaced, correct?
Okay. And move south.
Move south a little bit, yes.
So I know we're a little bit out of order, but should we hear his comments that he has to say? So maybe you can
No, I'm
just
sorry.
provide
Is there-
those.
is there a
No, I mean,
laser
we're out of
pointer?
order because he hasn't
Is
finished
there a
the
laser
staff
pointer?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
presentation yet.
There's not a laser pointer, but
There's a laser pointer.
Is that it?
is that good?
Is this it? Okay. Thank you. All right, thank you. So anyway, start again. Tim and Catherine bought this house relatively recently. They're longtime members of the community, the house in the neighborhood. They were very excited to get this house. They, unlike some people we worked for, are really enthusiastic about embracing that this is in fact a historic house, and we're going to be reusing cabinetry and all sorts of things on the interior, even though it is really a thoroughly new house on the interior. It is of key importance that this house sort of remain the house it is. Obviously, we're proposing a bigger expansion of that basement. We've added that garage. And I think probably the most significant thing I wanted to point out is there's been a brief discussion about that proposed entry there. What's, I think, important to realize is the current entry is right there on the inside of that courtyard. And it's a very, very peculiar place. I mean, I've wondered about the logic that allowed it to be there in the first place. Was the house that backs up to it on Carmelo not built there originally? Were you supposed to come in from that direction? It's very unclear because it's an understated entry and it's in a very awkward place. We have to walk along that sort of small area between the two houses currently to find it, and it's a non-logical place for an entry. And so the biggest move we've come up with is to relocate that entry here so as to avoid that strange entry currently. And to do that, we have shifted this gate situation a little bit closer, i.e. right now that gate is about here. And so we've shifted a little bit closer, but we like sort of that off-center meandering approach. We think that's appropriate. Yes, so we're losing that original gate. There is a gate, over here that we're proposing to sunset as well. But really seemed imperative to us to sort of start with getting an entry that worked for that house. And that's the only sort of substantive change to the outside of the existing house that we really wanted to look at. As I mentioned, we are expanding the basement a bit. And then, of course, what we've done is take advantage of the existing garage to make that a downstairs basement and pull out that detached new stone garage to differentiate what's going on. We, as mentioned, there's several non-original windows that are being replaced. The original window that's here is being moved over to here. Right now, there is a bay window, which is not original, that we'll be replacing. So we're taking out an unoriginal window and replacing with an original window that's been relocated. As far as the distinction in finishes, one thing I wanted to talk about. There was one thing in Ms. Clovis's report that I would at least like to have a discussion. Most everything we were obviously fine with. But she does talk about reusing the Dutch door, which is currently back here on the house. It's out of the kitchen as a Dutch door. I actually have a picture of that Dutch door. I have a little bit crumbled. We have proposed to reuse it. However, because of the addition of a dog door, we're not sure it really is the most appropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd love not to have to do that if you could see fit to allowing us not to reuse that particular door, because a dog door isn't what we want in this particular house, and it is obviously a later addition. Everything else that Ms. Clovis proposes we think is terrific. I will pass out quickly the the first page here shows the existing stone, and the second page shows the proposed stone, showing a clear delineation in type. Both Carmel stones are very different attitude towards that stone. And here I'll give you this. This shows the shingles.
Okay.
That's the original shingles currently, with of course the tape measure giving you the idea what's going on. And when we are adding new shingle, what we'd like to do is stagger the edge. Right now it's a coarse edge, and we'd like to just break that by about 5/8 of an inch. Otherwise, we'd like the module to remain the same, and we'd like the color to remain the same.
Would you like them back? Thank you.
That's, I think, what I wanted to say. So if you have any questions, happy to try to answer.
Is the garage, the new garage, is that 10 feet wide?
It's actually 11.6 wide.
11.6. I'm just wondering whether the original stone wall could remain if you made that a typical 10-foot wide garage, maybe a little longer, but not 11.6, but 10 feet. That might give enough room to leave the original stone wall on the side of it, is a thought. I hate to see so many changes that are...
It is a little narrow, and cars are bigger. We were hoping to have a little bit more space to sort of get in and out of those, because that wall does come up, as you saw, a couple, 2.5 feet, and the stone does sort of intrude in that. So we were hoping to make that a little bit more usable, particularly since we do have basically a tandem spot here. And the reality is we'll have one car in the garage, and you know, they do have more than one car, and it allows us to have another car off the street. And so it does sort of crowd that existing width if we can't move that wall. And again, we are keeping the north wall on that edge. It is that south wall that we are proposing to shift.
Right. Or even widening the south wall just before the start of the garage is what I like that south wall because it's old and historic. And if you kept it up until you needed to get past the garage, if you get what I'm talking about, and you're going to be digging out there, you'd be digging out less. It's a lovely garden. if you just made it wider, just before the garage door
Mm-hmm.
started, as an option, as a thought, to keep the original wall at least in part.
And I'm going to be very awkward and invite my bosses here to articulate an opinion.
What's that?
I like to think of us as friends.
Oh.
Right, but in this particular juncture, they're my boss. So, I mean, what's your feeling about that? Would you like, would it be okay to, I think we're the only people here, could I have, either of you want to speak at all, or? Yeah. Okay.
I think our feeling about that wall is we love it. So the Carmel stone, we've had questions for our builder.
If you don't mind coming up to the microphone, because we do have a few people on Zoom that I'm sure really want to hear what you have to say too. It's okay.
Yeah, what I was saying is that, Tim Ramos, is that we like the Carmel stone wall and we love it. The questions that we've had about that is not about whether to move it or not, but can we actually keep it, how long it's gonna last? Because it's there, a lot of it has been falling apart. It's brittle in some places, so we've been asking, even on the north side, how do we make sure that we can keep it? So one question we have is just, is that thing gonna hold up much longer? I don't think we're against not widening, if you will, and then go out. I just don't know from an aesthetic perspective if that makes it look better to start this way and then, you know, kind of take a turn out like this, or to simply just make it wide as the plan shows it, repair the stones that's in there, and have it go in a straight line. And I'm not a designer. That's why Craig does such a great job. So that's more of a question that I would have is, one, what do we need to do that wall anyway? And would it look better to have it, you know, somewhat repaired and straight versus the way that it looks today, and then to jog in?
I can relate on the 10-foot wide garage and wanting something a little wider. I have a 10-foot wide, and I curse Carmel every time I pull in and out of my garage, so, yeah.
It doesn't allow for you to put a box or two on the side of your car with your door there. Yeah. And we plan on putting a modest car in there also, so we're not thinking about a big one or a two-door that's got the big long, you know, doors to it still. Just trying to figure out how to get out in and out of a car safely.
Yeah.
So the new wall will be stone? Yeah, okay.
Kind of refurbished, right? Because there's some, we're going to try to keep as many as we can, and to, you know, to try to, well, it's going to be beautiful, but absolutely.
Okay. Let's, if we don't have any pressing questions at this moment, let's go back to Surrey so that we can finish the staff portion, and then we can certainly go into the public version again and go from there. So you want to finish your presentation?
My presentation is finished.
You're finished.
And if you have any questions.
Okay, gotcha. So did anybody have any further questions for the staff? If not, sorry.
Well, I'm not sure it's for the staff, but the question about the addition in the back of what is now the kitchen, soon to be a bedroom apparently, just the fact that there is a large oak tree that's within 6 feet of that addition, just to give them a heads up on that one.
Okay, we'll open it up to the public.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, Sarah, back when she was at the city, the city forester actually identified that tree as not a significant tree. We were showing the requisite 6 feet there, but that one particular tree is in very, very bad shape and is called out as such on her report.
Mm.
That big one right in the corner, that
Yeah.
northeast
Yeah.
corner, yeah, that tree's not a worthy tree, apparently.
Any other questions for the architect
I
or
don't
the
think
owners?
so.
No?
No.
Okay, so we'll, any other comments from the public? If not, then we'll close it back out. So we have a request about the Dutch door. I think, you know, that we said kind of the same comment when we were out there. That door apparently has lost a tremendous amount of integrity. So do we want to have them keep that or not? Or should we, you know, agree with their request to not have to reuse that door? And then do we want to approve the project or not? So any thoughts on either of those two items?
I don't see why the door could not be removed.
Yeah. Agreed.
I agree.
Okay. Any further discussion or motion on this project?
I guess I have a little bit mixed feelings, that there's a lot of work being done on the house from my perspective anyway, minimal benefit. A lot of things are being changed. But taking one at a time, I really can't, cogently argue against them. So I guess I'm willing to approve it as designed, with the move that we would allow the Dutch door off the kitchen there to be done in.
I'll second.
Okay. Can we have a vote, please?
Board Member Hall,
Yes?
Board Member Goodhue,
Yes?
Chair Board Member Croman.
Yes.
Motion carries with 1 abstention and 1 absent.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the presentation. Did you just lose your, agenda? My agenda just.
Did it just go away?
Yeah, it did. Let's just see.
You can use mine.
All right, so nothing further from the public. Can we have maybe Board Member Dreyer can come back in?
I just gave him the
Oh, you
thumb.
did?
Yep, he's coming.
Okay.
We're dire.
Dreyer. So when he's wetter or drier? Nothing.
Good luck with it.
So, can we have the director's report, please?
Certainly. A couple of items of note for you. Just this, we're still in June. Yep, first part of this month, the City Council adopted our annual operating budget, which will go into effect July 1st. Of note for this body, that included, no, thank you. Of note, that included funding for the rest of the historic context statement update to the tune of about $80,000. We have applied for a state grant that could supplement that $80,000. The city would not have to pay that full amount. But the city council put their full support behind it by funding the full $80,000, and if we get the grant, then that's less money the city has to spend. So I think that's really noteworthy that the city council has put the priority on getting the rest of that document updated to look like the update we just did. So that's very exciting.
That's great.
Also, just to give you a heads up, city council news last meeting, the city council considered and provided direction at a policy level to staff to continue moving forward with establishment potentially of the design review board like the city used to have. There are some implications for this body. One of the potential outcomes was that a design review board could be melded with this historic resources board. That's not a done decision. There are apparently jurisdictions that do that around the state. So it's something we'll continue to explore through the process. But I would certainly encourage the Historic Resource Board members to stay tuned on that conversation. When there are public hearings, obviously you're welcome to attend those as members of the Historic Resources Board. And if you have questions as we go through the process and can't attend a meeting, always feel free to call me or any of my staff, and we can keep you filled in what's going on. But no final decisions on that yet. We're still in the sort of like policy creation part of that exercise right now. Also of note for you, JB Pastor, the project down at the 7th and Dolores with the community room, they did resubmit a set of plans shortly after their denial at the city council. Those plans, probably no surprise, include retaining the community room in place, no demolition, no impacts to that building at all. We are planning right now, targeting to be back to you in July. Okay, Evan didn't kill me with his eyes there. We will plan on being back to you in July with that application for your determination of consistency. So just keep that on your radar. Those plans are available on our website right now, on the city website. So you can go look at the renderings, you can look at the plans. If you want to ahead of time, they're available for anyone in the public that would like to see them. And then the last bit of news for you is that the city's housing element draft is out for public review and has been for a few days now. We're in the middle of our 30-day public review, which ends on July 6th. We're taking public comments on that. We had a joint meeting of the City Council and the Planning Commission last week to talk about that. When the public comment period closes on July 6th, we will be going to the City Council on July 11th to tell them what we've learned during that 1 month period of collecting, sort of coalescing those comments. And then we'll be back to City Council on August 1st with a final draft of the first draft of our housing element, which hopefully will get the blessing and we'll send off to the state for the state's 90-day review. So we're still got some ways to go. We're still targeting end of this year, early next year for adoption of that document. So we're moving quickly, but we're making sure there's a lot of opportunity for public input, including members of our boards and commissions. So by all means, please go onto the website. If you haven't been there yet, it's a great website. It's really slick. You can open up the draft housing element and make comments in the website on each section of the document. Your comments can go in there and they go straight to our team, so they know what part of the document people are making comments on and who made the comment. Unless you want to be anonymous, you can do that too. But I highly encourage you to do that and stay tuned on that, because it's going to affect all of us in some way, shape, or form.
And Brandon, is the deadline for HCD to approve, is it approve it or accept it by December 15th?
So December 15th is the initial deadline where we need to have acceptance, approval, we'll call it what you want, by the state. There is a 120-day, call it grace period, that as long as we have been working with the state and communicating with them and showing a good faith effort, which we certainly have been, then there's no penalties for 120 days after that. We're trying to get it adopted as close as possible as December, but the reality of it is probably will be about a month behind that.
Is there history that they take the 120 days to evaluate it once it's submitted?
The 90 days?
Or 90 days,
Yeah,
sorry.
traditionally we've heard as people, they do tend to take their full 90 days, but we're trying at the staff level to do what we can. We have a meeting with them this week via Zoom. We have a site visit with them next week to try to like prime the pump a little bit for their review and hopefully turn it around a little bit faster. We've been bringing them along throughout the process so that it's not hitting them cold, with the hopes that maybe that 90 days turns into 60. But yeah, it sounds like they often do take their full 90 days. Yeah. And that's all I have for you. Unless you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer.
I do. On the historic context statement, Catherine Gualtieri isn't here anymore as on the board. Who's going to be, I know Eric put a lot of time in on that. Who is going to be working on that?
That will be up to you all to decide. So when we get ready to start on that effort, which we're not ready to do quite yet, we'll agendize that. You all can appoint your subcommittee for that effort.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Any other questions? Awesome. Okay, so we have future agenda items. I think we've already decided that we'll get an updated site picture on the presentation items that we're going to use for the level 2 project to be sent to the city council. So that'll be an updated agenda item for next month, right?
And the JD, is it building?
Oh, yeah.
Is coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if that's ready, then you'll just put that on as an action item, right?
Correct, yeah. The future agenda items are more when the board members would like to see something on. That'll come on as a regular course of business for you.
Okay, any other future agenda items? Okay, any other comments by members of the board? Awesome. And I think we are adjourned.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How about that?
No ticket on my car.